We are taught to see the world in two distinct parts. There is the kingdom of the animal, a world of motion, of nerves, of muscle, and of the hunt. And there is the kingdom of the plant, a world of stillness, of sunlight, of roots, and of photosynthesis. But this is an illusion. It is a story with the middle, and most important, part torn out. There is a third kingdom, a third form of life, so strange, so secretive, and so powerful that it makes the other two possible. It is a kingdom that is not animal, not plant, but something other. An intelligence that operates on a different, slower, and far more connected timescale. We see its brief, ephemeral, and beautiful fruit when a mushroom pushes up from the damp earth. But the mushroom is not the creature. It is just a ripple on the surface, a signal from a vast, hidden, and continent-spanning consciousness that lies beneath our feet. Tonight, we are not just telling a story about mushrooms. We are exploring this other intelligence. We will trace the story of this silent, invisible network, this hidden foundation that built our world, that connects all life, and that may, in the end, be the only thing that can save it. It is a journey into a world that operates on a different, slower, and perhaps far more conscious timescale than our own. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Sharing this slow, quiet descent into the Earth's hidden mind is, as always, a quiet comfort. Now, dim the lights, perhaps turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Imagine it as the sound of the air moving through a damp, dark forest, the scent of wet earth and decay. Let the familiar, bright and fast-paced world fade away, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We think we know them. We see them after a rain, a sudden bright jewel pushing up from the dark, wet earth, the white, fragile stem, the perfect red-gilled cap, the mushroom. It is the visible, tangible, and beautiful form of this third kingdom. But this is a misdirection. The mushroom is not the creature. It is a fleeting, temporary, and ephemeral event. It is, to use a simpler word, the fruit. It is an apple, hanging for a day from the branch of a tree that is the size of a continent. The real organism, the true, enduring, and living being, is hidden. It is a ghost in the machine. It lives its entire long life in a state of near total invisibility, a subtle and intelligent matrix woven through the very fabric of the world. We call it mycelium. It is a living lace. It is a network of impossibly fine, white, biological filaments, each one a single thread called a hypha, thinner than a human hair. These threads are the true body. They are the bones, the nerves, the muscles, and the mind, all in one. This body has no center. It has no brain. It has no single point of command. It is a decentralized, fluid, and sentient web, a biological internet that grows, thinks, and feels as a single, unified, and sprawling consciousness. And this body is immense. When you walk through a quiet forest, you are not walking on dead leaves and soil. You are walking with every step on the back of this one single, hidden creature. A creature that can stretch for yards, for miles, for thousands of acres. This invisible entity, this sentient web, is not idle. It is not just there. It is the single, most active, and most powerful engine on the planet. It is a vast, external, and planetary-scale digestive system. It is a stomach stretched out over the entire surface of the globe, and its one relentless and sacred purpose is to eat. It is the grand alchemist of the earth, the architect of decay. Imagine a world without an end, a world where death is not a transition, but a final, hard, and permanent stop. This was the planet before the fungi claimed it. When the first great forests evolved, they unleashed a new kind of power. a molecule called lignin. This is the substance that makes wood woody. It is a biological armor, a rigid, complex, and defiant material, and for millions of years it was an evolutionary riddle with no answer. It was, effectively, indestructible. When these first lignin-rich trees died, they did not rot. They could not. They simply fell, and they stayed. For geologic ages, the planet was piling up its dead, a sterile, ever-thickening crust of undecayed corpses, layer upon layer. The world was choking on its own success, suffocating under a mountain of its own unburied ghosts. Life was locking itself away, trapping all the essential nutrients in a wooden planetary tomb. The system was broken. The cycle of life and death had stalled. And then this third kingdom, this invisible subterranean consciousness, found the key. It was not a physical tool, it was a chemical one. The fungi, in an act of pure biochemical genius, evolved the one single complex enzyme capable of unlocking that lignin molecule. This was the invention of decay. It was the fungi that taught the world how to rot. This invisible mycelial web became the planet's great external stomach, its one true digestive system. It began to exude these powerful alchemical enzymes, dismantling the woody fortresses that nothing else could touch. It began to eat the indestructible. The fungi became the great recyclers. They unlocked the trapped carbon. They liberated the minerals. They broke the dead down into the rich, dark, and fertile soil that would fuel the next life. They are not just a part of the cycle. They are the engine of the cycle itself. Without them, there is no soil. There is no new growth. There is no future. They are the planet's quiet, essential, and eternal alchemists. And this act of chemical digestion, this breaking down, was not their only purpose. They were also the architects of creation. They were the engine of new life, a system of transport, of communication, and of eternal, unstoppable generation. The mushroom is the fruit. The mycelium is the body, but the true, final, and eternal expression of the fungal kingdom is something else. It is the spore. It is the purpose of the mushroom, the reason for that brief, beautiful, and ephemeral display. The mushroom is a launch platform, a biological tower, built for the sole purpose of releasing this microscopic, invisible, and almost weightless dust. A single mature mushroom can release not thousands, not millions, but billions of these spores into the air, a silent, colorless, and continuous explosion. It is a galaxy of potential, a cloud of biological information, and this particle is perhaps the most resilient and most patient object that life has ever built. It is not a seed, as we know it. A seed is a complex, multicellular package filled with food, a delicate embryo. A seed is a promise that needs water and warmth and soil. A spore is a different thing entirely. It is a single, hard-shelled and perfectly dormant cell. It is a biological time capsule, engineered to its very core for one purpose: to wait and to travel. It is the astronaut of the natural world. The spore is almost without weight. It is designed to be taken by the slightest, most insignificant whisper of a breeze, to be lifted from the forest floor and carried into the high atmosphere, into the jet stream itself. It is a traveler of the upper winds, a silent biological plankton, crossing continents and oceans with an ease that no other life can match. It is built for this journey. It is built to endure the absolute. It can be dried to a state of perfect crystalline non-existence. It can be frozen, solid, for 1,000 years. It can survive the vacuum of space and the hard, sterilizing and cosmic radiation of the void. This is not reproduction as we understand it. This is not a gentle, seasonal renewal. This is a strategy of planetary and perhaps cosmic saturation. It is a relentless, patient, and unending bombardment of the entire globe with a single coded message: wait. The spore waits for a year, for a decade, for a century, for its impossible 1 in a billion journey to end. It waits until it lands on a surface that is, by some perfect chemical chance, right? A patch of damp wood, a specific, nutrient-rich piece of earth. And then, and only then, does it awaken. It sends out a single fine probing thread, the hypha, the first thought of a new invisible body. This eternal, resilient and patient traveler, this spore, was the key to the next great chapter of life. It was this microscopic, airborne and almost indestructible vessel that allowed the fungal kingdom to leave the ancient oceans, to brave the harsh, sterile and rocky emptiness of the continents. This spore was the first footfall on a dead, stone world. Before the green, there was only stone. For nearly 3 billion years, life had been a purely aquatic story. The oceans were a frantic, teeming and microscopic soup of creation. But the land, the great, silent continents, was another planet entirely. It was a world without soil. It was a world without a single, living, breathing thing. Imagine a planet of endless, raw and sterile rock, a mineral desert scoured by a wind that carried no scent of life, a landscape of grey and brown and rust. It was a world washed by a rain that was not water, but a weak carbonic acid, falling from a sky that held no birds. This was the hostile, elemental and silent stage for nearly all of Earth's history. The plants trapped in the water could not make the journey. They were soft-bodied, needing water, needing nutrients, needing soil. And the land offered none. But the spore, that eternal, resilient and patient traveler, could. Carried on that scentless wind, the first fungal spores landed on this dead, mineral world. And here, in an act of profound and almost unimaginable creative desperation, the third kingdom made a bargain. The fungus, this invisible web, could not make its own food. It was not a plant. It could not eat the sun. But it was a master of structure. It was an architect of defense. It could anchor itself to this bare, hostile rock. It could hold on, and it found a partner. It found the one other thing that could survive this journey. Algae, the microscopic, green and sun-eating life from the sea. This was the first great symbiotic handshake. The fungus provided the house, the anchor, the fortress, a physical shield against the terrible, sterilizing and unfiltered ultraviolet light of the ancient sun. The algae, in return, became the engine. It sat, safe within the fungal walls, and it ate the light, turning that raw solar energy into sugar, into food. This was the birth of the lichen. It was not a plant, it was a partnership, a living, breathing and cooperative stain, a crust of life on a dead stone. It was the first, tentative and successful footfall of life on land. But this creature, this humble, slow-growing and symbiotic crust, was not just living on the rock. It was not a passive resident. It was, in its own, slow, patient and chemical way, at war with it. It was, quite literally, eating the planet. The lichen was not a passive resident. It was an invader, and its invasion was the first true act of geological creation this planet had ever seen. The fungus, the dominant partner in this symbiotic firm, began a slow, patient and chemical assault on the sterile stone world. It had no roots to crack the elemental rock. It had something better. It had acid. This invisible mycelial web, in its partnership with the sun-eating algae, began to exude a constant, weak but relentless stream of specialized organic acids. This was an act of pure, slow-motion alchemy. The acid was not a violent force, but a patient, chemical key. It seeped into the microscopic, crystalline structure of the stone. It began to unmake the rock. This acid, this living fungal secretion, began to dissolve the mineral bonds. It grabbed the iron, the phosphorus, the magnesium, the essential, locked-away nutrients that the stone had held captive for eons, and it pulled them out. It ate the stone, molecule by molecule. This was the creation of grit, the first true sand. And as this chemical assault weakened the surface, the physical world joined the attack. The water, the rain, could now find a purchase. It seeped into the tiny acid-etched cracks, and when the nights grew cold, this water would freeze, expand, and with a small, sharp pop, it would shatter the rock just a little. This was the birth of soil. It was not the rich, dark, and loamy earth we know today. It was a thin, gritty, and mineral-rich paste, a living, acidic slime of half-eaten rock, dead lichen, and trapped moisture. But it was enough. This act, this slow, billion-year-long act of planetary digestion, was the most important event in the history of life. The fungi, in their desperate creative hunger, were terraforming the planet. They were building the stage. They were creating the soft, wet, and nutrient-rich bed that the next and far more complex wave of life would require. They were laying down the welcome mat. They were building a world for the plants. And in this new, thin fungal soil, the next phase of life began. It was not a small, green carpet of moss. It was something else, a silent, grey and towering forest of the impossible. This new, thin and gritty soil, this living carpet woven by the fungi, was the invitation. And the plants, waiting in the shallow green waters, finally accepted. They came ashore, but they were not the titans we know. The first, true vascular plants were small, timid, and ankle-high. They were a green, mossy, and tentative fuzz on the surface of the fungal earth. For millions of years, the world was flat. It was a two-dimensional landscape of wet ground and a vast, empty, and silent sky. And then, rising from this flat, green carpet, were the towers. They were the first true vertical structures on Earth. They were not trees. They were not green. They were pale, grey, and monolithic. Imagine a forest of silent, unbranching, and featureless columns, some rising 20, even 30 feet into the empty air. A landscape of colossal, upright pillars, their surfaces scarred and fluted like the skin of a strange, fossilized elephant. This was the world of prototaxites. For more than a century, science looked at these fossils in a state of profound confusion. What was this thing? It was too big to be a mushroom. It was too simple to be a tree. It had no leaves, no branches, no roots. It was a biological question mark, a monolithic thing that dominated the planet for 40 million years. The theories were wild. Was it a giant, rolled-up mat of algae? A bizarre, unknown kingdom of life? And then the microscope revealed the truth. The answer was, in its own way, the most chilling of all. The internal structure, the microscopic and undeniable fingerprint, was a chaotic, woven and densely packed mat of fungal hyphae. This was not a tree. It was not a lichen. It was a fungus. The great, silent and towering forest that ruled the Devonian world, the first shadow to ever fall upon the land, belonged to the Third Kingdom. We were living, for an entire geologic age, on a planet of giant mushrooms. We must imagine this. A silent, grey and alien landscape, a world of pillars, a world where the largest living thing on Earth was a 30-foot, featureless and leathery spire of pure, matted mycelium, a creature that was not a plant, not an animal, but a silent, unmoving and watchful tower of the other. This was the fungal kingdom at its most visible, its most triumphant, its most monolithic. It was the king of a world it had built, but its reign, this age of silent grey towers, was about to be challenged. The small, green and timid plants living in the shadow of these giants were inventing a new, revolutionary and powerful kind of armor, a substance so defiant, so complex, that even the fungi, the great alchemists of decay, would be rendered helpless before it. A substance called lignin. The plants, for millions of years, had lived in the shadow. They were the soft, green and ankle-high carpet beneath the silent grey towers of the fungi. And then they found the weapon. It was not a fang. It was not a claw. It was a molecule of pure structural defiance. Its name was lignin. It was a biological plastic, a microscopic, complex and rigid scaffold that allowed a plant to do something that, until then, had been revolutionary. It allowed it to stand up. Lignin was the invention of wood, and with wood, the plants broke the fungal monopoly on height. They began to climb. They began to reach. They built a new, green and complex canopy, a living architecture that stretched for the sun, and in doing so, they pushed the old, grey, fungal towers back into the shadows they came from. The age of prototaxites was over. The age of the great, global, carboniferous forest had begun. The plants had won. They had built their fortress. But they had built it too well. The fungi, the great alchemists, the masters of decay, were stumped. They had spent 1 billion years learning to eat stone. They had no enzyme, no chemical key, no formula in their ancient library that could unlock this new, complex and defiant molecule. Lignin was indigestible, and so, for 50 million years, the great sacred cycle of life and death, the very cycle the fungi themselves had invented, was broken. When one of these new lignin-rich trees died, it did not rot. It simply fell. It fell onto the corpse of another, and another, and another, a planet-wide pile-up of the undecayed, a sterile accumulation of wooden skeletons, layers thick, miles deep. The world was choking on its own, immortal, uneaten dead. This was not a forest, it was a tomb. The planet, in its evolutionary zeal, had buried itself in its own uneaten success. It was this vast, 50 million year-long mistake, this great planetary failure of digestion that we, in our own distant time, would dig up, set on fire, and use to fuel our own brief industrial dream. We call it coal. For 50 million years, the planet held its breath. It was a world of wood, a sterile museum, a system waiting for a key. The great alchemical engine of the fungal kingdom had stalled. And then, somewhere in the damp, compressed and ancient forest floor, a single invisible thread of mycelium mutated. An accident. A random, beautiful and world-saving mistake. A new enzyme was born. It was a chemical key of almost magical and terrifying potency. A molecule specifically and perfectly designed to unlock the defiant, complex and unbudging fortress of lignin. We call it white rot. This was not just an enzyme. It was a chemical fire. It was the invention of a digestive power that could, quite literally, unmake the very substance of the world. The fungi, after a 50 million year-long fast, had finally learned how to eat. The key was copied. It spread through the vast subterranean network, a silent chemical whisper passing from one fungal body to the next. And then the great feast began. The planet's 50 million year backlog of unrotten wood, the mountains of buried corpses that we call coal, became a banquet. The fungi descended upon this wooden tomb and began, with a ferocious, patient and enzymatic hunger, to dismantle it. This is the event that ended the Carboniferous. It was not a meteor, it was not an ice age, it was a change in the planet's digestive system. The fungi had caught up, they had solved the lignin problem. They reignited the great, broken and sacred cycle. They began, once again, to return the dead to the living. They re-established their dominion as the planet's great rotters, the alchemists, the recyclers. They were, once again, the masters of the unseen. But this act, this great, planetary-scale cleanup was only a fix. It was a return to their ancient role. Their next act would be a true revolution. It would be a work not of separation, but of union. They would move from being the world's janitors to being its partners. They were about to make a bargain that would build the modern world. The plants had made it to land, but they were not winning. They were survivors, not conquerors. For millions of years they were still tethered to the wet, swampy margins, the only places their weak, inefficient and primitive roots could find purchase. Their new lignin bodies could reach for the sun, but their feet were still trapped in the mud. They had a problem. They could not mine the earth. A plant is an architect of wood, but it is an inept miner. The dry, distant, mineral-rich soil was a locked pantry. The phosphorus, the nitrogen, the essential nutrients they craved were held captive, just out of reach. The fungi, however, were not miners. They were master alchemists. They had been eating rock for 1 billion years, and so a new bargain was struck. It was not a partnership of equals. It was a handshake of pure, mutual, and desperate need. The plant, the clumsy, solar-powered giant, made an offer. "I have sugar," it said. "I am a factory of light, but I am starving of earth." The fungus, the invisible, sentient, and subterranean web replied, "I am earth. I am the key to every locked mineral, but I have forgotten the sun." The deal was made. The fungus, the mycorrhizal network, did not just grow around the plant's roots. It fused with them. It plunged its own fine, intelligent hyphae into the plant's living cells, or wrapped them in a dense, intricate, and intimate sheath. It became the plant's new interface with the planet. It was a living, extended, and microscopic root system, 1,000 times more efficient, 1,000,000 times more vast than the clumsy plant-made root it had infected. The fungus would mine the distant soil, unlock the phosphorus from the rock, and trade it, along with water, directly to the plant. In return, the plant would pump its liquid sugar, its solar-fed energy, directly back into the invisible subterranean body of the fungus. It was a handshake that would build the modern world. It was the invention of the true forest, and it was the creation of a new planetary-scale economy, a hidden underground marketplace that was, in its own way, alive. This handshake was not a private contract. It was the blueprint for a civilization. The fungus, this invisible, sentient network, did not just connect to one plant. It fused with all of them. It became the common thread, the shared subterranean system that wove its way through the roots of the entire forest, linking the oak to the pine, the birch to the maple. It connected competitors. It connected allies. It built a marketplace. We have given this a simple human name. We call it the Wood Wide Web. But this name is an injustice. It is a cliché. It diminishes the reality. This is not an internet of information, a place of abstract data. This is an economy of substance. It is a physical, biological stock market, a living, breathing, and complex exchange, and its one universal currency is carbon. The fungus is the master of this market. It is the broker. It is the only entity that has an account with every single client. It can take the liquid sugar, the solar profit, from the tall birch tree that is bathing in the sun, and it can transport that energy, that pure liquid life, through its own dark subterranean veins. It moves it yards away to the small, shaded and starving fir sapling, a creature that has not felt the sun in a week. The fungus allocates. It is a broker engaging in a kind of biological arbitrage. It takes from the rich and, for a price, it gives to the poor. This is not an act of charity, it is a strategy. The fungus is not a passive pipe, it is an active investor. By keeping the small shaded sapling alive, by ensuring its survival, the fungus is diversifying its portfolio. It is ensuring that its own future food supply, the sugar from the entire forest, remains stable, diverse and resilient. It is the silent, unseen and intelligent force that balances the budget of the entire living world. It is the hidden foundation of the forest's economy. And this economy, this vast, interconnected and cooperative network, was not just for sharing resources. It was also for sharing something else, a warning. This was not just a marketplace, it was a whisper network. The fungal web, this shared subterranean consciousness, was not just a conduit for food, it was a conduit for information. The forest could talk, and its language was not sound, it was chemistry. Imagine a single small sapling at the edge of a clearing. An insect, perhaps a deer, begins to chew its leaves. This is not a silent, passive event. The plant responds. It is an act of violence. The tree screams. It does not scream with a sound. It screams in a sudden, panicked and airborne release of a chemical, a specific volatile compound that means one thing: I am being attacked. The nearby trees, the ones that can smell this signal on the wind, will respond. They will begin, in anticipation, to pump their own leaves full of bitter defensive toxins. But the wind is a fickle and public messenger. The fungus, the mycorrhizal network, is a different thing entirely. It is a private line. It is a secure, hardwired and targeted cable. As the small tree is wounded, its roots do not just absorb, they transmit. They send that same panicked chemical signal, that scream, directly into the fungal hyphae that are fused with its very cells. And the network carries it. It is a signal that moves silently, rapidly and invisibly through the dark subterranean soil. It moves from root to root, from node to node, from the victim to the neighbor. The other trees, the ones 100 yards away, the ones that could never smell the airborne alarm, feel this signal. They receive the message. We are under attack. And the entire surrounding forest, in a single, silent and coordinated act, begins to change its chemistry. It prepares for a battle that has not yet arrived. It becomes, in an instant, a fortress of bitterness, a wall of poison. This is not a collection of individual competing trees. This is a superorganism. It is a single, vast and interconnected entity bound together by a silent, chemical and fungal nervous system, a being that can feel and respond and communicate as one. This network was the plant's greatest ally, a shared mind, a shared defense. But the fungal kingdom, in its patient evolutionary genius, did not just learn to talk to the rooted, green and static world of plants. It also learned how to manipulate the warm, fast and hungry world of animals. It learned to speak to the beast. The mushroom's strategy is simple. It uses the air. It rises up and releases its dust to the wind. A simple and effective plan. But some fungi, in their strange evolutionary wisdom, chose a different path. They chose the path of the hidden, the subterranean. They evolved to fruit not in the open air, but deep in the dark, damp and secret earth. This is the truffle. And this is a profound evolutionary problem. How does a creature, buried under a foot of soil, spread its seed? Its spores are trapped. It is a genetic coffin. Unless it can hire a messenger. It cannot use the wind, so it must use the beast. It needs an animal, a creature with legs and a memory and a hunger. But how does a silent, buried and static object call a warm, fast and hungry animal to its exact location? It learned to speak their language. It learned to speak the one universal chemical language that travels through the dark, the language of scent. The truffle did not just evolve to be edible. It evolved to be irresistible. It began a new chemical arms race. It began to manufacture in its own dark subterranean laboratory the most complex, most potent, and most intoxicating perfumes on the planet. This was not the simple smell of food. It was a chemical story. It was a complex cocktail of esters and sulfur compounds, a scent that, to a wild boar or a squirrel or a human, is not a suggestion. It is a command. It is a scent that mimics the very chemistry of life itself, the pheromones of a mate, the deep, musky and primal signal of readiness. The fungus, in its cold, calculating and alien genius, had learned to forge the scent of desire. The beast, maddened by this intoxicating chemical promise, is forced to dig. It finds the truffle, it eats the prize, and in this, the bargain is sealed. The spores, the true purpose of this entire, elaborate and perfumed deception, are designed for this one, single journey. They are built to survive the hot, acidic and dark passage of the animal's gut, and to be deposited miles away in a new and fertile patch of earth. This was a masterpiece of manipulation, a gentle, symbiotic and delicious deception. The fungus learned to speak to the animal, to use its hunger, its desire, to spread its own quiet line. But this kingdom, it is not always a partner. Sometimes it is not a collaborator. Sometimes it is a hunter. The fungal kingdom is not always a partner. It is not always a gentle, symbiotic and perfumed deception. This third kingdom, in its patient, decentralized and quiet intelligence, has also mastered the art of the kill. It hunts. This is not the hot, fast and muscular hunt of the animal. It is a hunt of a different and far colder order. It is a hunt of pure biological engineering, a hunt of patience and of lethal geometric precision. In the dark, microscopic and hidden world of the soil, in that same damp and life-filled earth, the mycelial web stretches, a seemingly harmless, random and gossamer lace. It is, in this form, the passive, quiet recycler. But in this same soil lives another creature, the nematode, a microscopic, unsegmented and voracious roundworm. In its own tiny and watery world, it is a lion. And when the fungus senses this lion, when it feels the chemical and perhaps vibratory signature of its prey, it changes. It is no longer a passive web, it becomes an assassin. The fungal threads, the hyphae, begin to grow in a new and terrible shape. They loop back upon themselves, forming with a perfect cellular and engineering precision a three-dimensional ring, a microscopic silken noose, a living biological snare. The fungus lays its traps, hundreds of them, and then it waits. It is a patience that is absolute, a stillness that is a part of the soil itself. The nematode, that blind, hungry and muscular hunter, moves through the dark, wet earth. It is searching for bacteria, or perhaps for smaller worms. It passes by chance through one of the rings. It is a fatal and final mistake. The fungus feels it. In less than 1/10 of a second, the 3 cells of that ring, that silken noose, react. They have sensed the touch, and they respond with a sudden, violent and osmotic shift. They inflate with a near instantaneous hydraulic pressure to 3 times their original size. The loop does not just tighten, it strangles. The nematode, that microscopic lion, is held fast, its powerful, thrashing and desperate body pinned by a living biological garrote. There is no escape. The struggle is brief, and then the true quiet horror of the hunt begins. The fungus does not eat its prey from the outside. It does not tear. It does not chew. A new kind of hypha, a new specialized and probing thread, grows from the ring. It pierces the tough outer cuticle of the worm, and it invades. It grows with a patient, relentless, and digestive purpose into the creature's living body. It branches, a silent, internal web, drinking the worm from the inside out, until all that is left is an empty, hollow, and nutrient-drained husk, still held perfectly in its silken fungal noose. This is the fungal hunt. It is a hunt of lethal, patient, and precise machinery. It is a trap for the body. But this kingdom, in its dark, alien, and evolutionary genius, has also perfected a different and far more insidious kind of hunt. A hunt that does not trap the body, a hunt that, first, traps the mind. This is not a trap of silk. This is not a crude, mechanical, and physical snare. This is a different and far more terrifying kind of violence. It is an act of neurological warfare, a quiet, chemical, and biological heist. The fungal kingdom in this hunt does not seek to strangle the body. It seeks to possess the mind. The agent of this possession is a fungus known, with a chilling simplicity, as Ophiocordyceps. Its target is an ant, a creature of perfect social and chemical order. The hunt begins with a single microscopic spore, landing by chance on the hard outer shell of the ant. At first, nothing happens. The ant continues its life, its work, its patrol. But the spore, in its patient chemical infiltration, begins to drill. It releases an enzyme that dissolves the ant's own armored and protective exoskeleton, and it enters. Once inside, it does not kill, it hides. It begins to grow as a yeast, a quiet, single-celled and stealthy passenger flowing, undetected, through the ant's own blood. It multiplies. It is not yet a hunter, it is an occupying army waiting for a signal, and when the moment is right, when the fungal mass reaches a perfect critical and computational threshold, the signal is given. The fungus stops hiding, and it begins to hack. It does not attack the ant's brain. It is more subtle and more terrifying than that. It seizes the controls. It leaves the brain, the seat of the ant's self, intact. But it wraps its own, invisible, mycelial threads around the ant's nerves, around its muscles. It disconnects the pilot from the cockpit. The ant is now a puppet, a zombie. Its mind, its self, is a prisoner, trapped inside a body that is no longer its own, a body that is now piloted by a different, colder and alien intelligence. And this new pilot has one single and unwavering command. Climb. The ant, in a spastic, drunken gait, leaves its home, its colony, its purpose. It abandons the dark, safe and familiar forest floor, and it begins a journey it would never, ever make on its own. It climbs a tree. It moves against gravity, against instinct, against its very nature. It is driven by the fungus, a quiet, chemical puppeteer searching for a single, perfect and mathematically precise location. A location perhaps 2 feet off the ground, a place with the exact, perfect and necessary humidity. A place with the ideal, dappled and gentle light. The ant finds its spot, a leaf, the underside of a branch. The fungal pilot has reached its destination, and it issues its final and its most terrible command. The ant, in a final convulsive and involuntary act, bites. It drives its own powerful mandibles deep into the leaf, into the wood, and it holds. The fungus, in its final, triumphant act, floods the ant's jaw muscles with a chemical that locks them, a biological cement that turns this bite into a permanent, structural, and final anchor, a death grip. The ant is now a statue, a monument to its own quiet and neurological murder. It hangs there, frozen, its legs curled, its body a tiny, perfect, and defiant flag. And now, its purpose served, the fungus allows it to die. The battle is over, the heist is complete, and now the true alien and terrible transformation begins. The fungus, which has, until now, been a stealthy, invisible and internal network, finally reveals itself. It has consumed the ant's internal world, and now it will claim its external one. A single, horrific and beautiful stalk, a pale alien antenna, begins to grow. It forces its way out from the only place it can, from the ant's head. It is the fungus, the true creature, the fruit rising from the empty, hollowed out and conquered husk of its victim, its pilot, its tomb. A tomb that is, in this final, chilling irony, the perfect, elevated and launch platform for the next wind-born and patient generation of its spores. This hunt, this neurological heist, was not a singular event. It was not one fungus targeting one ant. It was a philosophy. It was a strategy practiced by an entire ancient and terrifyingly diverse family of assassins, the Cordyceps family. The ant, with its dramatic zombie-like climb, was just one, highly visible and public victim. This family did not just hunt in the sunlit open air. It also hunted in the dark, in the deep, silent and subterranean world of the soil. Here, in the damp, compressed earth, another creature lives its own, hidden and dormant life. A wasp larva, a cicada nymph, a beetle grub. It is a soft-bodied, pale and waiting thing. A package of pure, defenseless and buried energy waiting in its clay cell for its own future and magical transformation. It does not need to be found. The spores are already in the soil. A silent, patient and microscopic minefield. A single, thread-like hypha, the seeking, questing and intelligent body of the fungus, finds the soft larval skin. And, as it did with the ant, it enters. But this hunt is not a heist of the mind. There is no brain to control, no legs to pilot. This is a different and quieter kind of murder. This is an act of replacement. The fungus begins to grow, slowly, meticulously, from the inside out. It does not kill the larva. Not at first. It consumes it, cell by cell, with a terrible alchemical and surgical precision. It replaces the soft, larval tissue with its own hard, dense and fungal self. The creature's insides are, quite literally, turned to stone. A stone made of fungus. This is a perfect, internal mummification. The larva is dead, but its shape, its perfect external larval form, is held intact. A hollowed-out, fungal-filled and perfect cast. And then, when the entire soft and larval body has been consumed, when nothing is left but this mummified fungal statue, the true creature reveals itself. Just as it did with the ant, it reaches for the air. It reaches for the light. A bright orange or yellow or red finger of a thing pushes up from the dark, silent earth. It looks to our eyes like a strange, rootless and alien plant. This is the vegetable wasp, the caterpillar fungus. It is the fungal kingdom's trophy, its flag, its launch tower, planted in the perfectly preserved and perfectly replaced body of its victim. A quiet, beautiful and chilling monument to a hunt that happened in total silence, a foot beneath our world. This is the art of the fungal hunt, a specialized, intricate and almost intelligent form of violence, a strategy of infiltration, of possession, of replacement. But this kingdom does not always need to be so elaborate. It does not always need to control its victim. Sometimes its kill is a far simpler, more brutal and more ancient act, a simple and devastating act of chemical assassination. This kingdom does not always hunt with such intricate, specialized and almost surgical precision. The cordyceps is a masterpiece of neurological warfare. The silken noose is a marvel of biological engineering. They are complex, they are elaborate. But the fungal kingdom also understands a simpler, more ancient and more brutal kind of power. It understands the power of the simple, chemical and devastatingly effective bomb. A single, well-placed and patient mine. This is the art of Amanita phalloides. We call it the death cap. It is perhaps the most perfect and most treacherous object that nature has ever designed. It is not a monster. It does not look like a threat. It is not the devil's fingers or the bleeding tooth. It is beautiful. It is an elegant, unassuming, and almost classic mushroom, a pale greenish-white and perfectly formed silhouette. It looks, to the untrained and even to the trained eye, safe. It mimics. It wears the disguise of the harmless, the edible, the common field mushroom. It does not repel. It invites. This is the first and most beautiful layer of its deception. The second is the taste. The few who have eaten it and, in a strange medical miracle, survived to tell the tale, all report the same chilling fact. It is not bitter, it is not acrid, it is, by all accounts, delicious. It is a wonderful, savory and satisfying meal. This is the true, insidious and chemical genius of the kill. The victim eats the meal, and they feel fine. They feel, in fact, wonderful. They go about their day. They go to sleep. They have no idea that the war has already been lost. Because the true assassin, the amatoxin, is not a simple stomach poison. It is a different and far more patient kind of key. It is a molecule of pure cellular and targeted sabotage. It is designed to ignore the stomach, to be absorbed, to pass silently and harmlessly through the blood, and to find its one true and final target, the liver. The toxin is a key that fits with a terrible and perfect precision into the one essential and irreplaceable lock of our own cellular machinery. It finds the enzyme responsible for creating all new proteins, and it turns it off. It is a single, chemical, and irreversible switch. The victim still feels fine, and in the dark, in the silence of their own warm and sleeping body, their liver begins to dissolve. The factory of their life, the one essential and chemical engine that cleans their blood, that powers their world, is, quite literally, and cell by cell, being unmade. The first violent and agonizing wave of sickness, when it finally comes, a day, 2 days later, is not the poison. It is an echo. It is the sound of a house that has already fallen down. By the time the victim feels the attack, the battle is over. The liver is a dead, liquefied and useless thing. The kill is not a violent, convulsive and dramatic event. It is a quiet, clinical and systemic shutdown. A slow, cold and chemical checkmate. A death of pure and patient and silent and elegant and treacherous design. The death cap is a clean chemical assassin. It is an engine of pure biological shutdown. It kills the liver and the body quietly follows. But not all fungal poisons are so precise. Not all of them grant the mercy of a simple physical end. Some are designed for a different and far more insidious purpose. They do not just kill the body. They first unravel the mind. This is the story of ergot, a small, dark and unobtrusive fungus that grows like a blackened, hardened kernel on the head of a stalk of rye. And rye, for centuries, was not a choice. It was a staple. It was the dark, heavy and essential grain of the poor. It was, quite simply, the daily bread. Imagine a small, medieval village, a cold, wet harvest. The rye is tainted. The grain is ground, the dark, fungal ergot with it. The flour is tainted, the bread is baked, and the village, in its cold, damp and hungry innocence, eats its daily poison. And then the sickness begins. A sickness that came in two terrible and opposite forms. The first was a fire in the blood, a burning, agonizing and invisible heat that started in the limbs. The poison is a vasoconstrictor. It clamps the arteries shut. The blood, the warm, living river, stops flowing to the hands, to the feet. The flesh, starved of life, begins to die. It turns black, dry, and mummified. It became gangrenous. This was St. Anthony's fire, a holy, burning and dismembering plague. That was the kind death. The other was a fire in the mind. The compounds in ergot are not just a poison. They are a key, a chemical key that unlocks a different and far more terrifying door. They are the raw, natural, and potent source of LSD. They are a powerful and violent hallucinogen. The village did not just get sick, it went quite literally mad. They did not just feel a fire in their limbs, they felt a crawling, electric, and spider-like sensation under their skin. They saw things that were not there, demons in the shadows, faces in the wood grain. They heard voices, they spoke in tongues. They were seized by sudden, violent, and uncontrollable convulsions. To a world that did not know chemistry, a world that knew only God and the devil, this was not poison. This was not a sickness. This was a possession. This was an act of pure, spiritual, and demonic warfare. We are left with a chilling and unanswerable question. How many times in our long, dark, and superstitious history, when we saw demonic possession, were we simply looking at a bad loaf of bread? The speculation is haunting. We look at the Salem witch trials, a small, paranoid, and Puritan town, a group of young girls, and the symptoms as they are written in the historical record: sudden, spastic, and violent convulsions, a feeling of being pricked and bitten by invisible phantoms, bizarre, terrifying, and demonic hallucinations. It was a textbook case of ergotism. And the historical record shows that their staple crop in that damp, cold, and perfect fungal year was rye. We cannot prove it, but it is a cold and terrible possibility that the entire iconic and foundational horror of Salem, the trials, the accusations, the hangings, was not the devil. It was not madness. It was not even hysteria. It was perhaps just a quiet, chemical, and invisible taint in the bread. The poison of the ergot was an invisible horror, a chemical taint hidden in the daily bread. It was a terror that masqueraded as madness. But this third kingdom does not always hide. It does not always rely on such subtle chemical deceptions. Sometimes its threat is purely aesthetic. It is a visual and visceral act of psychological warfare. There are forms in this kingdom that seem designed not just to exist, but to disturb. They are not beautiful in the way of a flower. They are not majestic in the way of an animal. They are something else. They are living sculptures of pure, calculated, and biological wrongness. This is the fungal, uncanny valley, a place where life takes on a shape that is almost familiar, but just twisted enough to trigger a deep, primal, and cellular revulsion. We find it in the dark, wet leaf litter. A pale, greyish, and leathery egg pushes up from the soil. It is a strange, alien pod. And then it hatches. It does not bloom, it ruptures. The pale, gelatinous sac splits open, and from within, 4 to 7 slender, blood-red and tentacle-like arms uncurl. They are tentacles, like those of a small, buried and dying octopus. They are fingers, red and claw-like, grasping at the air. This is Clathrus archery, the devil's fingers. The visual horror is its function. The red, fleshy arms are coated in a dark, greenish-black and fetid slime. This slime, the gleba, is a mass of spores, and it smells with a powerful and purposeful intensity of rotting meat. It is a flower designed by a nightmare. It is a blossom that mimics a corpse, a perfect chemical and visual lure for the flies and beetles that will become the unwitting messengers of its next generation. And then there is the other, a creature that seems to be a biological mistake, a lumpy, white and fungal mass that appears on the forest floor to be in pain. This is Hydnellum pecki, the bleeding tooth. It does not bloom, it weeps. From its pale, velvety and irregular surface, it exudes a thick, sticky and shockingly bright red liquid. The droplets are perfect, crimson spheres, clinging to the white flesh. It looks, for all the world, like a living, wounded thing. A set of bloody, disembodied teeth pushing up from the earth. A fleshy, formless being weeping tears of pure liquid blood. These creatures are a visual assault. They are the fungal kingdom's mastery of the grotesque. They are a quiet and chilling reminder that this third kingdom is truly other. It is not plant, it is not animal. It is an intelligence that plays by a different, stranger, and more unsettling set of rules. It is an aesthetic that does not care for our comfort. These are the external visible phantoms. They are the ones that haunt the forest floor, a psychological, if not always chemical, threat. But the true and perhaps most intimate relationship we have with this other kingdom is not the one we see in the woods. It is not the one we accidentally eat. It is the one that is already and always inside us. The one that lives in a quiet, fragile and negotiated truce within our own warm, dark and internal world. This third kingdom is not just an external force. It is not a distant, alien and separate power that we only encounter in the dark forest or in the tainted grain. The truth is far more intimate and far more unsettling. We are not sterile. We are not a fortress. We are an ecosystem. We are a walking, breathing and complex planet of our own, a world teeming with 1 trillion microscopic and non-human lives. And this fungal kingdom, this other intelligence, is not just out there, it is in here. It is Candida. It is a yeast, a single-celled and ancient fungal resident, and it lives right now in the warm, dark and wet ecosystems of our own living bodies. It is a part of our hidden foundation. It is a normal and perhaps even necessary part of our internal soil. For our entire lives, it exists in a state of profound, delicate and negotiated truce. It is a quiet, unassuming and single-celled citizen, held in check by the vast, warring and bacterial nations of our own internal microbiome. It is, in its balanced state, a harmless and perhaps even helpful passenger. But the truce is fragile. The balance is everything. And when our own internal human world is compromised, when our soil is damaged, when we take a powerful, broad and sterilizing antibiotic, a chemical bomb that wipes out the bacterial nations that held it in check, or when our own complex and delicate immune system fails, the quiet resident, the harmless passenger, receives a signal. The truce is broken, and the fungus changes. It is not an invasion. It is a transformation, a betrayal. The small, round and unassuming yeast cell receives the message of our weakness, and it becomes a predator. It shifts its shape. It begins to grow for the first time in its true, ancient and filamentous form. It grows hyphae. It becomes a network. This is the enemy within. It is an opportunistic, silent and internal invasion, a fungal web that can spread with a quiet, relentless and systemic purpose through our own warm and living tissues. It is the other kingdom, revealing that it was never truly other at all. It was and is a part of us, a hidden, patient and internal ghost waiting for the walls of our own complex and human kingdom to fall. This is the fungal nature, an intelligence of shadow, of opportunity, of the dark, internal and hidden spaces. But this kingdom, this force that thrives in the absence of our own light, is not always a story of sickness. Sometimes in the deep, external and moonless forest, this same hidden, dark-loving kingdom has learned to create its own. A cold, chemical and ghostly light. A fire that does not burn. This is a different kind of darkness. This is the light of the fungal kingdom. Imagine a forest so deep and so old that the moon is a forgotten rumor. The air is damp, thick, and smells of wet earth and decay. It is a blackness that is absolute, a void. And in this void, a light begins to glow. It is not the warm yellow spark of a predator's eye. It is not the silver, reflected light of the sky. It is a cold, pale and greenish-blue emission. It is a light without heat, a fire that does not burn, and it is coming from the dead. This is foxfire, the fairy light. It is the ghostly, ethereal, and silent luminescence of the third kingdom. The light is not a thing, it is an act. It is the visible chemical echo of the mycelial web, the true, invisible body of the fungus as it performs its most sacred and most ancient work. It is the light of digestion. This is the armillaria mushroom, the humongous fungus, or one of its many cousins, as it eats, as it dismantles a fallen log. The cold, blue-green glow is the chemical byproduct of this process, the exhaust of the lignin-eating engine. It is a slow, cold, and biological oxidation. It is the very process of decay made visible. But this, in its cold, accidental, and chemical beauty, is a profound evolutionary riddle. Why? Why would a creature that lives its entire life in darkness, a creature that is, for all intents and purposes, blind, why would it waste its precious, hard-won energy to create light? Is it an accident, a simple, meaningless, and functionless chemical leak from a metabolic engine that is too large to be perfectly efficient? A beautiful, but ultimately pointless quirk of its chemistry? Or is it a strategy? Is this too a part of the long, silent, and patient hunt? Is this cold, pale, and ghostly light a lure? Is it a false moon, a tiny glowing beacon on the dark forest floor designed to attract the other creatures of the night? The beetles, the flies, the gnats, the very creatures that crawl and scurry, the ones that the fungus needs to walk across its body, to pick up the invisible microscopic spores and to carry them as unwitting, winged messengers to the next dead, dark, and waiting log. Or perhaps it is the opposite. Perhaps it is not a lure, but a warning, a chemical keep out sign, a signal of bad taste, of poison, of a meal that is not a meal, warding off the nocturnal grazers that might otherwise consume the mycelium's hard-won feast. We do not know. The glowing, silent, and chemical signal from this other intelligence is a message we have not yet learned to read. It is a cold fire, a ghostly and beautiful question mark burning in the heart of the forest's decay. This is the fungal mastery of the wild, of the dark, of the chemical. But this same kingdom, this same chemical mastery, was not just a force of the forest. It was a force that, in the hands of one single-celled and unassuming member, would leave the wild and build a civilization. The fungal kingdom is a world of specialized and often terrifying genius. It is a kingdom of chemical assassins, of zombie ant puppeteers, of living, silken traps. But the one that truly conquered us, the one that built our world, was not a monster at all. It was, by comparison, almost boring. It was a single, humble, and unassuming cell, a simple yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. This is the fungal kingdom, stripped down to its absolute metabolic essence. It is a creature that wants only one thing: sugar. It is a life of profound, glorious, and uncomplicated hunger. And in its simple, ancient, and relentless pursuit of this one single food, it excretes. It is a chemical factory, and its exhaust, its waste, changed everything. It excretes a gas, and it excretes a liquid. The gas is carbon dioxide, the liquid is ethanol. And in those two simple waste products lies the entire hidden foundation of human civilization. For thousands of years, our ancestors lived on a hard, flat, and joyless cracker, a sterile, unleavened, and difficult to digest paste of ground grain and water. And then, by a beautiful, divine, and biochemical accident, this yeast, this wild, airborne, and invisible passenger fell into the dough, and it began to eat, and as it ate, it breathed. It exhaled its gas, its carbon dioxide into the dough, and in that breath, it gave the cracker a new, light, and airy soul. It was the invention of bread. This was not a small thing. This was the invention of the staple. A food that was soft, that was stable, that could be stored. A food that could, for the first time, reliably feed a city. And its other gift, its liquid, was just as profound. This same humble cell, in another wetter and sweeter mixture, would perform its same simple alchemical act. It would eat the sugar, and it would excrete its liquid, alcohol. We call it beer, we call it wine. But for the ancient world, it was not a luxury. It was survival. It was a source of calories. It was a social and spiritual lubricant. But most importantly, in a world where water was a gamble, a world where a single, clear stream could be laced with a deadly, invisible and bacterial plague, this liquid was safe. The alcohol was a preservative. It was an antiseptic. It was the first, and for a long time, the only truly safe thing to drink. We did not build our cities alone. We built them in a quiet and desperate and essential partnership with this single, invisible and life-giving cell. It was our first and our most powerful domesticated ally. And this alchemist, this builder of bread and of wine, was not the only hidden fungal partner that would, by pure, beautiful and world-changing accident, save us. The fungal kingdom gave us bread, our sustenance, and wine, our solace. It was a gift of life, of calories, and of safety. It was an intentional, symbiotic, and ancient partnership. But its next, and perhaps greatest gift, was not a gift to us at all. It was an accident, a beautiful, microscopic, and world-changing contamination. It was the collateral benefit of a war that we did not even know was being waged. For 1 billion years in the dark, damp and hidden world of the soil, the fungi had been locked in a silent, chemical and relentless battle. Their enemy was the bacterium. The two great and single-celled kingdoms were fighting for the same prize, the dead, organic matter of the world. It was a war for resources, a war of attrition, a war fought not with tooth or claw, but with pure, targeted and chemical assassination. The fungi, in their slow, evolutionary and alchemical genius, had developed a weapon. A chemical bomb, a specific molecule designed for one simple and brutal purpose: to find a bacterium and to stop it from building a wall, to make it explode, to kill it. This weapon was penicillin. For millions of years, this was their private war. It had nothing to do with us. Until 1928, in a London laboratory, a biologist named Alexander Fleming returned from a holiday. He was a messy, disorganized and brilliant man, and he had, by a beautiful, historic and lucky act of sloppiness, left a petri dish, a small bacterial colony, uncovered by a window. While he was gone, a different, wilder kingdom had invited itself in, a single airborne and fungal spore, a penicillium spore, the ancient enemy. It had landed, a microscopic invader, in the center of the bacterial world, and it had begun to fight. Fleming looked at the dish. He saw the bacterial lawn, but around the single fuzzy blue-green colony of the mold, there was a ring. A perfect, clear and shining circle, a circle of death, a halo where the bacteria could not and would not grow. He was not perhaps the first to see this, but he was the first to understand it. He was the first to realize that this mold juice, this chemical weapon from an ancient microscopic war, was not just a poison for a bacterium, it was a medicine for a human. We did not invent the antibiotic, we just found it. We found the loaded chemical gun left on the battlefield of a war that has been raging silently in the soil for an eon. The fungal kingdom, in its ancient chemical mastery, had already perfected the key. And in that one accidental and beautiful discovery, the entire fragile and modern world of medicine was born. This was a gift of physical salvation. But this kingdom, in its darkest and most mysterious and most sacred corners, held one final and far stranger key, a key to the mind. This kingdom gave us the key to our survival, the bread that fed us, the alcohol that saved us, the medicine that healed us. Physical keys for a physical and desperate world. But what if this third kingdom, this silent other intelligence, held one final and far stranger key? A key not for the body, but for the mind. This is not a story of food, it is a story of thought. It is the story of psilocybin, and it is perhaps the most profound, the most unsettling, and the most compelling what if in the entire human story. It is a theory, a whisper known as the stoned ape, and it asks a simple, terrifying, and beautiful question. What if we did not find our humanity on our own? What if we were given it? What if our own sudden and explosive leap into language, into art, into self-awareness was a gift from a mushroom? The stage is the African savanna 2 million years ago. Our ancestors, the first fumbling and upright hominids, are in trouble. The familiar, safe and fruit-filled forest is shrinking, dying, turning to grass. They are small, weak and slow, pushed out into this new, vast and terrifyingly open world. A world of lions, of hyenas, of a horizon that never ever ends. They are, by all accounts, a failing experiment, but they are hungry, and they are following the one reliable source of food, the great wandering herds of ancestral cattle. And in the dung of these great new grazing herds, a new and strange and purple-black mushroom is growing, Psilocybe cubensis. They eat it, perhaps at first by accident. And in that act, a new and revolutionary chemical enters the primate brain for the first time. A key slides into a lock. The theory suggests that in small neurological doses, this key was not a trip, it was an upgrade. It was a chemical tool that sharpened the senses. It enhanced visual acuity. The edges of the world became clearer. The hunter, his eyes now chemically and subtly enhanced, could see the distant prey just a little better. It was an evolutionary edge. But then, inevitably, came the larger dose. The dose that was not an edge. The dose that was a revelation. And in this, the true, profound, and calm chill of the theory unfolds. What happens to a proto-human mind when the self, the ego, the hard, defined barrier between me and the world quietly dissolves? What happens when this creature, for the first time, feels a sense of profound, oceanic, and interconnected awe? When it sees the patterns in the stars, the geometry in the leaves, the meaning in the abstract? What happens when a mind that has only ever communicated suddenly, desperately, wants to share? Is it here in this shared, silent and chemically induced moment of communal awe that the first true word is born? Is this the spark, the catalyst for religion, for art, for the sudden, inexplicable and explosive tripling of our brain size? We cannot know. It is a story, a theory, a dream. But it is a dream that is rooted in a hard, chemical and undeniable reality. That this fungus, this third kingdom, holds a key that fits, with a perfect and terrifying precision, the most complex and most human locks in our own conscious minds. It is a co-evolutionary partner that did not just offer us food or medicine. It offered us, perhaps, ourselves. This is the power of the fungal gift. A gift of sustenance, a gift of health, a gift of the mind. And now this same kingdom, this ancient, patient and alchemical intelligence, is offering us one final and perhaps most desperate gift, a gift of salvation. We have built a new kind of tomb, a tomb of our own industrial and arrogant design. We have created molecules that nature never imagined, materials designed with a terrible short-sighted genius to be immortal. Plastic, the stubborn, complex and unbudging polymers that will outlive our cities, our languages, our very species. Oil, the thick, black and toxic blood of an ancient, buried world spilled across the new one. And radiation, the invisible genetic fire, the slow cellular decay that poisons the very earth for 10,000 years. We have, in our brilliance, recreated the lignin problem. We have buried the planet in a new, sterile and man-made crust of the undead, a world choking on its own, indestructible and plastic ghosts. We have created a problem that we, in our own fumbling and physical world, cannot solve. And so once again, the planet is turning to its silent, subterranean and alchemical partner. The gift of salvation is digestion. This is mycoremediation. It is the act of the fungal kingdom as the planet's true and only immune system. It is the fungal web in its infinite, patient and chemical genius learning to eat our mistakes. We see it in the aftermath of an oil spill. We lay down a humble mycelial mat of pleurotus, the oyster mushroom. And this living, white and fibrous web, this creature that evolved to eat the stubborn, woody lignin of a dead tree, sees the oil. It sees the long, complex and carbon-rich chains of the hydrocarbons. And to the fungus, it looks like food. It releases its ancient, powerful and lignin-busting enzymes, and it begins to eat. It begins to disassemble the toxic industrial sludge, breaking it down, molecule by molecule, into its simple, harmless and component parts. It eats the poison. It leaves the soil. In the mountains of plastic waste, a new and hopeful discovery. Aspergillus tuberculosis, a simple, humble mold. A fungus that has been found in a quiet, evolutionary leap, eating polyurethane. It is learning the key. It is developing the enzyme. It is figuring out how to unlock our most immortal and most arrogant and most toxic invention. But the final and most calm, chill evidence of this gift comes from the one truly and apocalyptically dead place on Earth, the ruins of the Chernobyl reactor, a place of invisible atomic fire, a concrete tomb bathed in a gamma-ray flux that should sterilize all life, and yet they are there. Lining the hot, radioactive walls of the reactor's core are fungi. They are black, melanized, and thriving. They are not just surviving the radiation, they are eating it. In an act of pure science fiction and biological alchemy, these radiotrophic fungi are using the melanin in their skin to capture the gamma rays, and to transform that raw atomic and deadly energy into food, into life. This is the fungal promise. The kingdom that ate the stone, the kingdom that ate the lignin, is now quietly and without our permission learning to eat the poison, the plastic and the very fire of our own modern world. This is the hidden foundation, the planetary immune system, a quiet, decentralized and other intelligence that is already in its own slow and patient way cleaning up after us. This kingdom is a chemical alchemist, an executioner, a partner, a savior. But through all of this, we have been avoiding the central and most unsettling question: is it intelligent? We are a species obsessed with a single definition of that word. To us, intelligence is a thing. It is a specific object, a brain, a dense, wrinkled and centralized mass of neurons, a cockpit, a pilot, a single protected and electrical command center. We define intelligence as ourselves. The fungal kingdom is a quiet and profound rejection of this entire idea. This is an intelligence with no center. It is a mind with no brain. It is a nervous system woven into the soil of an entire continent. To understand this, we must look at a fellow traveler, a creature that is not technically a fungus, but which shares its alien philosophy: the slime mold, Physarum polycephalum. It is, in its essence, a single, enormous and bright yellow cell, a giant, pulsating and liquid amoeba, a creature with no nerves, no brain, no front, and no back. And it is, by all definitions, smart. We see it in the laboratory. Scientists place this yellow liquid creature in a petri dish. They place its favorite food, a flake of oatmeal, in the exact pattern of the city of Tokyo. They place other flakes in the pattern of the surrounding satellite cities. The slime mold, this brainless liquid, begins to move. It explores, it expands, it pulses, and in a matter of hours, it solves the puzzle. It retracts its inefficient, redundant paths. It reinforces its strongest, fastest connections. It recreates, with an almost perfect mathematical precision, the entire efficient and complex map of the Tokyo railway system. It is a living calculation. It is not thinking in the way we do, it is processing. It is using its own decentralized and liquid body as a sentient map, a physical, external, and computational memory. It is solving a problem that would take a human engineer months. This is the fungal mind. This is the other intelligence. It teaches us that a mind does not have to be a thing. A mind can be a process, a system, a network, a slow, patient, and collective understanding woven into the very fabric of the world. This decentralized, computational, and liquid intelligence is not just a microscopic curiosity in a laboratory dish. It is a philosophy that this third kingdom has used to build a life, and it has used it to build a life on a scale that is not just biological. It is geological. It has built a single individual that is larger than a city, a slow, quiet, and living God, hidden for thousands of years, sleeping beneath the soil of a single American forest. Our idea of an individual is small. It is a single, contained, and mortal thing, a body, a person, a life that runs, frantic and fast, for a handful of decades and is then gone. We are a brief, warm, and nervous spark. The fungal kingdom does not know this limitation. Its definition of an individual is a different and far more terrifying concept. It is a concept of geological scale and of geological time. In the Blue Mountains of Oregon, there is a forest, and beneath this forest, under the soil, lives a single, quiet, and unassuming creature. We call it Armillaria ostoyi, the honey mushroom. But this is not a patch of mushrooms. It is a single being, an individual. This individual is, by mass, the largest known organism on planet Earth. It is a single, genetically identical and interconnected body of mycelium that covers nearly 4 square miles. It is a single mind, a single self, that occupies over 2,000 acres. A living, breathing, and hunting creature, larger than a city. And it is not just large, it is old. This is not a life that is measured in decades. Its age is estimated in millennia. This one single, quiet creature, this silent god in the Oregon soil, was born thousands of years before the first pyramids were built in Egypt. It was alive when Rome was founded. It was alive when it fell. It is alive still today. This is not a gentle giant. It is not a passive symbiotic partner. It is a hunter, a killer. Its body, its vast, hidden and dark intelligence, spreads through the earth in long, black and leathery shoelaces, the rhizomorphs. These are not roots. They are exploratory, predatory and seeking tendrils. And when they find a tree, a healthy, living and 1,000-year-old conifer, they do not offer a handshake. They invade. They slip like a dark, strangling wire under the bark. They feed on the living. They are a slow, patient, and unstoppable plague, a single vast and territorial consciousness that is, tree by tree and acre by acre, consuming the entire forest from below. This is the fungal individual, a creature that redefines our concept of scale, of time, of life, and of death. It is a being that borders on the eternal, a slow, quiet, and immortal God sleeping and feeding just beneath our feet. This is its power in life, but its true and perhaps most profound role in the story of this planet is its relationship not with life, but with its absolute and fiery end. The dinosaurs, in their 160 million year-long reign, were the masters of a world that seemed eternal. They were the unassailable titans of a sun-drenched, green and vibrant planet. They were, by all accounts, permanent. And then, in a single, terrible day, the sky fell. A 6-mile-wide piece of rock, traveling at an inconceivable speed, struck the Earth. The impact was not an event. It was a reset, a planetary-scale sterilization. The world was scoured by a blast wave of superheated, supersonic fire. The oceans boiled. The sky, filled with trillions of tons of pulverized rock and ash, went black. The sun, the very engine of the plant kingdom, was gone. And in this new, cold and sunless darkness, the great green and glorious age of plants came to an end. The forests died. And when the forests died, the titans that fed on them, the great herbivores, starved. And when the herbivores starved, the titans that hunted them, the great carnivores, followed. The animal kingdom, the entire, magnificent, and loud drama of the dinosaurs, collapsed into a silent global tomb. The world was dead, or so it seemed. But in this dark, cold, and rotting new world, this planet-sized morgue, this silent global feast of the uneaten dead, one kingdom did not starve. One kingdom did not need the sun. One kingdom in this darkness was just getting started. This was the kingdom of the fungi. They were the first, and for a time, the only, responders. They were the planet's undertakers. They inherited a world that was, from pole to pole, a single, vast, and waiting banquet of corpses. The mycelial web, the great, hidden stomach, did not just survive the apocalypse, it thrived on it. The fossil record from this exact moment, this KT boundary, is a strange, thin and dark line in the rock, and in this one, dark global layer, there is almost no pollen from the trees. There is only a spike, a sudden, violent and planetary-scale explosion of fungal spores. It is a fungal spike, the greatest and perhaps only time in history that this third kingdom owned the entire, ravaged and dying planet. They were the masters of the apocalypse, the quiet, patient and digestive engine of the world's great reset. They were the foundation, not just of life, but also of its end. And in their ancient, patient and almost indestructible design, we find one last and perhaps most unsettling possibility. A journey that is not just planetary, but cosmic. The fungi owned the apocalypse. They were the masters of the dark, dead and rotting world. Their survival was not an accident, it was a design of almost perfect and almost alien resilience. This brings us back to their one true and eternal vessel, the spore. We have called it an astronaut, a time capsule. Perhaps we were not speaking in metaphor. The spore, as we have seen, is a masterpiece of dormancy. It is built to endure the absolute. We know it can survive a state of perfect crystalline dryness. We know it can survive the cold that is absolute zero. We know it can wait in a state of suspended animation for millennia. But the tests have gone further. We, in our own human curiosity, have taken this ancient, humble traveler, and we have subjected it to the one final and most sterilizing test of all, the void. We have sent them to the outside of the International Space Station. We have exposed these single, microscopic and fungal cells to the true, unfiltered and brutal reality of the cosmos, the hard vacuum that boils water from the blood. the cosmic, sterilizing and relentless bath of ultraviolet radiation, the fire of the solar wind, the absolute end. And when we brought them back, they woke up, they grew, they were, by all accounts, unharmed. This is a fact, not a theory. It is a fact that forces a new and final and profoundly unsettling question. Why? Why would a terrestrial, soil-bound organism, a creature born of the damp, dark, and wet earth, evolve a defense against a danger that does not and has never existed on our planet? Why is it built to survive the vacuum of space? The answer, perhaps, is the simplest one. The answer is that perhaps it is not from here. This is the theory of panspermia, the idea that life is not a local, planetary, and spontaneous event, that it is instead a cosmic infection, a seed, a spore, a patient, and microscopic traveler drifting for eons in the cold, dark, and interstellar night, carried on the solar winds or encased in the heart of a comet. A single, ancient, and alien seed landing by chance in the warm, primordial, and welcoming ocean of a young and sterile Earth. We cannot know, but it is a thought of profound and calm, chill power, that this other intelligence, this third kingdom that we have seen as our partner, our poison, our savior, is not our partner at all, that it is, in its very essence, alien, the first, successful, and most patient invader of all. But in the end, it does not matter if the spore fell from the stars or rose from our own primordial sea. Its function, its purpose, and its power remain the same. It is the system. It is the network that connects the stone to the plant to the animal, and the end to the beginning. It is the silent, conscious, and invisible grid on which all our loud, fast, and frantic lives are built. It is, and has always been, life's hidden foundation. Our journey is at an end. We have traveled from the sterile, stone-grey deserts of the ancient land to the chemical, silent, and neurological heist of the zombie ant. We have seen the kingdom that taught the world to rot and the one that learned to eat the sun, and we are left finally where we began. We are creatures of the loud drama. We see the world in flashes of motion, the run of the predator, the fall of the leaf, the crash of the wave. We are, by our nature, obsessed with the visible, the fast and the hot, the animal, the plant. But we have been walking all this time on the back of a different and far greater story. A story that is slow and cool and quiet. A story that is, by its very nature, invisible. This is the third kingdom, the one that does not just live on the earth, but builds it. The one that does not just die, but digests death itself. The one that is not just an intelligence, but a living, external, and collective mind. It is the silent partner in every breath we take. It is the alchemist that forged the soil, the broker that funded the forest, the assassin that perfected the poison, and the savior that holds the cure. It is the system, the connection, the grid, the network that, in its patient, ancient, and immortal wisdom, weaves the stone and the plant and the animal and the end and the beginning into a single, breathing, and unified whole. We are just the fruit, the noise, the fleeting, beautiful, and temporary event. They are the body, the silence, the process, the slow, deep, and eternal current that runs beneath. They are, and have always been, life's hidden foundation.